enjoying it as much as I am. I've been particularly anticipating this panel. So in this panel are three speakers which will be delivering papers which explore issues of time in specific manuscripts. And between them, they're going to cover a variety of languages, time periods, and genres. We'll be hearing about the enigmatic Voynich manuscript, the poetry in British Library Harley 2253, and an Italian chronicle. Our first speaker is Alexandra Marraccini, who is a doctoral student in History of Art at the University of Chicago and a visiting member of Corpus Christi Public Hospital. Her interests are in scientific and alchemical book and manuscript illumination, book history, and history of ideas. She is an editor of the Iconoclast cataloging system and was an RSA Crest Bodleian Fellow at the Bodleian Center for the Study of the Book this year. The title of our paper today is Asphalt and Bitumen, Sodom and Gomorrah, placing Yale's Voynich manuscript on the Herbal platform.
Hello everyone. This is just the beginning of a postdoctoral project that is going to be much broader in scope. So this is just based on my thesis work, on alchemical manuscripts, and on forthcoming work. So I'm just at the beginning stages here. The Voynich manuscript, otherwise known as Yale Voynich and 408, is one of the world's most delectable book historical mysteries. Written in as of yet undecipherable language, or perhaps pseudo-language, the roughly 550-year-old book continues to captivate the public at large. Perhaps this public interest has somewhat inexplicably tarred the book for academic audiences in the field, because it is only the recent publication of the 2016 facsimile that stands as evidence of scholarly interest in the new millennium. The purpose of this paper is to draw on the introduction to that volume by Raymond Clemens and the brief essay on iconography, as well as the preliminary contextualization of herbal materials and other work by Collins, Gibbons, Bly, Segrewitz, and others, to situate the Voynich manuscript within a solid book historical context and to propose further avenues of iconographic research. Playing off the image of the collapsed city of Sodom, which we will see shortly, in the Asphaltum entry in Salernian Herbals, as well as two extremely salient, unexamined copperanda from Glasgow, this essay aims to spark a new trend in Voynich scholarship amongst professional academic readers. The ongoing hostility of scholars to amateur enthusiasm from the public and the skepticism from the internet public at large towards scholarly tendencies of rigorous proof, in the end furthers no work on the manuscript at all and creates a strange gap in the discourse. It is in the spirit of renewing international work on this manuscript that I give this paper here today. Rambling is right in the facsimile volume to suggest taking great care in placing the Voynich images in an iconographic alchemical context, but is perhaps too careful in suggesting the text needs to be fully decoded to read them at all. In associating the Voynich manuscript with Salernian Herbals, I will rely mainly on four exempla: British Library Sloane MS 4016, British Library Edgerton MS 747, Vatican Chirurgy FVII 158, and Vatican Chirurgy FVII I.188, and I'll be referring to these by abbreviations. These herbals are all roughly in the pseudo-Apolleian tradition, but more specifically in the tradition Hake identifies as the Secreta Salernita, and Collins' extension of that category to include the Tractatus de Herbis, produced in the 15th century, in which she includes both the British Library examples I mentioned here. Additionally, these Tractatus manuscripts are described as having categorically variant plants by Segrewitz, who also explicitly links them to alchemical work. These alchemical herbals add on to the basic pseudo-Apolleian scheme, perhaps and likely influenced by Greek and Arabic materials. British Library Sloane 4016, which Bauman includes in the Northern Italian group, and Vatican 158, both open with a similar alchemical reference image, and these are folio 2R of both manuscripts, referring to the generation of metals and the relationship of that to plants. I am certainly not the first academic to mention the similarity of some of these sources to the Voynich manuscript, as Alain Tweed, among others, has, but this will be the first systematic examination of a particular case study not involving the Voynich drawing of plants themselves, but rather the fold-out images containing architectonic drawings in circular rounders. That the Vatican herbal manuscript should be connected first to the BNF and Sloane example in Stomata is clear from other iconographic parallels, including the fantastic animals often associated with both in the alchemical tradition and the herbal one. And again, these are folios 2A and, 6B and 20B, but they're in the same sort of order in the Herbals. Of particular interest in connecting these Herbals to Voynich, whose paper dating and location suggest a possible 15th century northern Italian origin, are the images in all 4 Herbals of asphaltum, which is boiled down from bitumen derived from herbal sources. The image of asphaltum, a substance not listed in the pseudo-Appalachian Herbals that inform the early incunables of this same tradition, is pictured in some exempla just as it is in Vatican 188. Biblically, this alludes to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 18 to 19, as well as to that of Noah and Moses. The latter example of Noah, both in terms of the boat and the flood, is pictured similarly to Vatican 188 in the de Braille's Hours and in many other manuscripts. The description of the substance bitumen in the Encyclopedia Judaica, drawing on both Pliny and biblical sources, serves as an excellent explanatory preface for this story. And here's the Edgerton manuscript, which also depicts asphaltum, and we'll come back to this. Bitumen is a black, flammable substance. It occurs in almost every part of the world and is found in various natural forms. In pure form, as in the Dead Sea, where it floats and collects along the coast. The pits in the valley of Sodom, referred to in Genesis 14:10, were probably bitumen quarries. In Mesopotamia, bitumen was used in building as a mortar, which sometimes soaked into the porous bricks, making them stronger, and also more flammable, as we'll get to in a second. Bitumen was employed for waterproofing boats, for constructing model boats for cultic purposes, and for sealing water ducts and irrigation canals. It was used in this way to caulk Noah's Ark, Genesis 6:14, and the basket which carries Moses, Exodus 2:3. The text of the Herbals themselves, next to the image of the flaming city of Sodom, I'm going to go back here, explains the connection. Sodom is paved with bitumen, which is set alight by God during the judgment of the city in Genesis, and causes the sea to melt and collapse into the Dead Sea. This explains, in the context of the Herbals, the natural presence of the substance in the Dead Sea today. But the collapsing city of Sodom doesn't always collapse vertically on the page. Consider the examples of Sloane 4016, Vatican 158, and Manfredis' Tractatus de Urbis on the screen now, which is BNF Lat 6823. And these are folios 13R, 12R, and 8B, respectively. And I'm just going to go through them really quick. So here's one. Here's the next. And here's the slope. Sodom here collapses onto itself in a crumpled circle of both space and time. The identical position of the Sodom image after the 2 donkeys, assigned as wild and domestic respectively in all 3 manuscripts, again suggests a common originary source or group of identical sources. For the purpose of the Voynich manuscript, though, we must first back up a little to note that Voynich's Herbal portion, one of the 4 that divide the manuscript, which does not retain its original foliation, though can be roughly categorized into herbal, balneological, astrological, and medical themes, is clearly influenced by the Solonian subtype. The colors and iconography are nearly identical, though much dispute remains about which plants are actually depicted, and Renée Zandbergen has spoken on this at the last International Voynich Conference. This is extra compelling when combined with the physical data that again suggest a possible northern Italian in origin. Note this as you view 3 comparenda with the Herbals cited above. So here's the first one, and I'm not trying to show the same species of plants. I actually don't want to get into the problems of pre-Linnaean speciation here, but merely to show iconographic similarity. So this is Vatican 158, and that's the black and white microfilm. This is Voynich Folio 100R next to Vatican 158. This is Voynich 18V next to B.L. Sloane. And this is Voynich 55V next to Edgerton 747. Again, I am not at all the first scholar to propose such a comparison in general, but give these examples for the first time in an academic context and with systematic citation and research in the accepted traditions of manuscript studies. Taking this prior evidence to account, it is evidently striking then that the flattened representations of a compacted and destroyed Sodom in Sloane 4016, Vatican 158, and Latin 6823 resemble the central city portions of Voynich's largest square foldout. So Voynich has this remarkable foldout, which is about 6 times the size of an average page. So here's an overview, and we're going to get closer to this image. This is one of the unique parts of the manuscript. Not only do the plants of this 15th century Salernian pseudo-Abelian timeline fit in with the Voynich's Herbal section, but the Asphaltum example extends these similarities into other parts of the manuscript. And here, I'm going to go through some of the images placed side by side. I've selected roundels, different roundels in different cases. There are other flattened architectonic cities in the manuscript tradition, like the city of Jerusalem, but they're almost always square, and they're not usually associated with water in the way that the city of Sodom is. And also note that the colors in the Voynich manuscript have, by most accounts, faded or were added on top of the ink afterward. It's a little complicated there. So here are some comparisons here. And I have to open my second slideshow because the TIFFs were so large. If you're an art historian, you have encountered this problem, that the files wouldn't load. So, these representations of Sodom could be This makes a compelling case for further seeking out flattened architectonic discs in similar manuscripts and using them as possible comparanda. These representations of Sodom could be the start of a valuable line of inquiry into the otherwise impenetrable fold-out portion of the manuscript, which until now has never been explicitly linked to an iconographic tradition as solidly documented and as relevant to the Voynich case, as well as datable as the northern Italian Herbal one. The city of Sodom also provides another link to Voynich in terms of Lot and his wife. As the infamous story of Genesis 19:16 relates, Lot's wife looks back at the burning city and is turned by God into a pillar of salt. In the De Sodoma, once spuriously attributed to Tertullian and now to Cyprianus Gallus, the author makes sure to note that although she is no longer technically even human, the pillar of salt that was once female must apparently continue its feminine purpose and thus continue to menstruate. So the Latin there is uxor remansit in Sodomus, jam non caro corruptibilis sed statua salis semper manens, et prenaturalia ea poison consuetudimis hominis ostendens. And slightly different Latin is given in different patristic sources and recensions of them. The connections between menses, asphalt, bitumen, and alchemy may seem rather vague, but is actually quite apropos of the Voynich context. And it's cut out some images here. It did not start at the beginning of my PowerPoint, so we're going to have to go back. Okay, so these are some comparisons of, once again, the flattened herbals to the roundels. More flattened herbals, more roundels, just to show the iconographic compression of time and space in both. And here we go. So here's why, to pick up again. Consider the many bathing nude women in the manuscript, some and many with protracted or swollen womb areas. Though the tradition of actually depicting menses in the medieval manuscript tradition is scarce, there are actually two relevant alchemical exempla, Glasgow MS Ferguson 6 and Glasgow MS Ferguson 67. And here's some more swollen womb women bathing. Ferguson 67 is actually a 16th century copy of the Liber Intitolato Il Tesoro del Mondo of Antonio Neri, and it features both a menstruating woman as a generative force of life along with her breast milk, and a lunar calendar that ties into the astrological portions of the manuscript. And this manuscript also has a balneological section, so this is preparing the herbs. It shows women both preparing, and in this case, man using a bathing chamber. MS Ferguson 6 features a menstruating woman as a lunar calendar. That again ties into the lunar calendars and many depictions of the female nude figures in Voynich. And this manuscript is actually fascinating. I have a forthcoming paper on it in Word and Image if you're more curious about this image. A lunar calendar, and so these are the two images that are somewhat speculated to be among many lunar calendars in Voynich. A lunar calendar is also included in British Library Edgerton 747. Lunar calendars are, of course, also similar to geomancy and other magical manuscripts, including the Bodleian's Digby 46, that provide another avenue of research altogether. Just very quickly, this is the Digby 46 with, again, Latin architectonic roundels, and again, a lunar calendar, and sidebars of towers of the seven planets that resemble the Voynich furnished pages. And I'm sorry I don't have as much time to talk about this manuscript as I would like, but this is another relevant avenue of iconographic tradition to pursue. Further, Adrichin 747 contains yet another drowned bitumen city of Sodom. Sloane 4016 also contains a furnace and an ostrich. Both are alchemical symbols, though the latter is more obscure. As Pliny would have it, the ostrich's stomach can digest anything, even metal, which is why Sloane's 4016's ostrich holds a horseshoe in its beak. And the ostrich is like the alchemical alembic, transforming one immutable substance, metal, into another, although in this case the result is not gold, but merely ostrich poop. And you can see the furnace there is sometimes depicted as making vitrium glass or glass vessels for the use of alchemy explicitly. Some herbals have vitrium glass included in the section this was from. Given this web of interesting bodily and iconographic connections drawn out by the example of asphalt and bitumen, as well as the secondary illuminations, I here can present in closing a set of very perfunctory yet suggestive stomata and a possible timeline for influence on the Voynich manuscripts from the Solonian herbal tradition and other related sources. So this draws first on the existing stomata provided by Segre-Ritz for Italian vernacular herbals. And I'm just going to specify that PowerPoint is really, really bad for drawing stomata. So the lines, I tried for 4 hours to get these right, but they're not exactly correct. So the gray is Segre-Ritz's stomata in her Italian language book about magical herbals. And the yellow is the new material from this lecture. So what you can see here are two sort of separate traditions of Italianate manufacture, mostly 15th and 14th century Latin herbals. One of them turns into the Tractatus de Urbis, the other kind of stays in the traditional Pseudo-Appuleian vein. Of the Tractatus de Urbis manuscripts, I'm tentatively splitting them into two groups, ones with the flattened asphaltum city and ones without it. Since no one's explicitly looked for this motif, there is another book on Italian vernacular herbals by Torricella, but since no one's explicitly looked for this motif, it's hard to tell where future additions to this category might come from, but it is a useful division here. And as you can see at the bottom, I list the Voynich manuscript as a possible related manuscript. So it is my hope that this will prompt not a closing argument, but a beginning for a much fuller discussion of the Voynich manuscript as a whole, the way it fits into the existing historiography and manuscript tradition, as well as its scholarly literature. Thank you so much.